Prof-It is brought to you by StopToShop.com, your ultimate source for Pokemon singles, tins, boxes, and cards from a variety of other games too. Type in the coupon code PROFIT in caps with a dash, and you'll sweeten the deal with a 10% discount on your full order. If you're looking for cards, make the stop at Stop to Shop. Hey Prof-It fans, and welcome to this week's episode of Prof-It. Episode 32. Can you believe it? It's been over a month since the last episode of Prof-It's been released. But thanks to you guys, from your donations, and help from my eBay auctions, and just overall support, I was able to get this MacBook as quickly as possible. Now, the Mac doesn't have the same video editing program that I used to use, Sony Vegas, so it took me a little while to figure out other programs, like Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere Pro. Now that I've started figuring things out, episodes of Prof-It should be coming out faster than ever. So, I just want to thank you guys, the fans, for all of your help. Here's all the people who helped me with my eBay auctions and donations. As always, I just want to thank you guys as the fans for giving Prof-It life. Without you guys, I'm just making an internet show that nobody watches. So, thanks for all your faithful viewing, and let's get back to weekly releases of Prof-It. This week, I'm going to talk about all the emerging decks that come out of our new Heart Gold Soul Silver Triumphant set. Check it out. Being away from full episodes for a month has really set me back, but at least my computer picked up a good time to stop. When we were last off, I was talking about the best decks from Battle Roads. After Battle Roads, there's about a month and a half where we get a new set, and then City Championships begin. The new set, Triumphant, was released on November 3rd, and City Championships begin at the end of November. Since this set has only been released for about a week, now's a perfect time to talk about it. Now, you already know that Luxchamp, Dalgachamp, Sableye, and Vilgar are already strong decks, and they're going to remain strong decks for the next format too. Instead of telling you guys more of the same, I thought I'd focus on the top emerging decks out of Triumphant, either entirely new faces, or old decks that receive a huge boost in playability. If you're getting bored or just can't afford one of the established top decks, looking into one of these decks will be a great idea. Before we talk about these decks though, here's the big thing to know about Triumphant. There are a ton of new trainers and supporters that will help a bunch of decks out. Amongst these are Twins and Black Belt. Two come from behind supporters that can only be played when you're down in prizes. Twins lets you grab any 2 cards from your deck when played, like a double Pokedrawer Plus, and Black Belt lets you do 40 more damage the turn you play it. Twins in particular is great for decks that rely on slow setup, or even ones that purposely fall behind first. We'll get to that later. Another supporter, and my personal favorite in this set, is Seeker. Seeker lets you pick up a Pokemon and all cards attached to it, from your bench to your hand, and then your opponent does the same. While this could possibly help your opponent by giving them something that they want to reuse, like an Uxie, there's so many advantages that I feel that the risk never really outweighs the gains. The first is that it can heal. Use a Warp Energy, switch, or just retreat to get a damaged Pokemon from the active to the bench. Then just pick it up with Seeker and it's healed. If it's an evolution Pokemon, just play them back down with Broken Time Space. Awesome. The second use is the reuse of a coming into play Pokemon power. Whether it's Uxie, Mesprit, Azelf, Crobat G, Chatot G, the list just goes on and on. You can just use your Seeker to pick up and replay them all. And the third usage is for winning by taking your opponent's Pokemon away. By forcing your opponent to pick up a Pokemon when they only have one Pokemon on the bench, you can win yourself a game just by knocking out their active Pokemon, and then they're out of Pokemon to play. With that many different uses, Seeker is a very fun card with a lot of potential combos. Junk Arm is a trainer that lets you discard 2 cards from your hand to take a trainer from your discard and put it back into your hand. Not only is this great for reusing Poketurns, Super Scoop-Ups, Pokemon Communication, all kinds of other trainers, but it's also great for decks whose fundamental strategy banks on them having Pokemon in the discard pile, or energies. And the last card, which isn't a trainer, but it's still a utility card, is Rescue Energy. Rescue Energy lets you recover a Pokemon and all stages below it back to your hand if it's knocked out by damage from an attack. This is an amazing recovery for decks that don't rely heavily on heavy energy attachments, and it also allows you an instant recovery without having to waste valuable resources. Be aware of these cards in any deck in future formats. I can't think of a single deck that wouldn't benefit from at least one of these cards, and that makes it a huge set to invest in. So, without further ado, let's get to those emerging decks. Number 6 is Nidoking from Triumphant. This guy might seem a little underpowered and misunderstood. At 3 energy, with a double colorless to deal just 80 damage and poison, he's pretty weak. But if you look at his body, base HP, and resistance, Nidoking just might have a chance to succeed at the very least as a semi-competitive deck. The cons are all pretty straightforward. He's pretty slow to set up, the water weakness could be trouble, and his retreat cost is huge, but there's a lot of good here too. Being a fighting type, Nidoking knocks out Luxray GL level X every attack. His resistance also means that Luxray's attacks will barely leave a scratch. His body increases your HP by 20 for each Nidoqueen that you have in play. You'll probably have enough resources to get 2 out on the field at once, giving you a massive 180 HP. With an Expert Belt or more Nidoqueens in play, he even matches the HP of Wailord. Combine this with the fact that the Stormfront Nidoqueen heals 10 damage in between turns, and Nidoking becomes a tank. Aside from water Pokemon, it should be really hard for your opponent to get you knocked out. His attack, Venomous Horn, seems weak, but it's actually a magic number with Expert Belt. With it, you deal 100 damage plus 10 for poison, just enough to knock out most SP level X's, and it knocks out Gengar from Stormfront with the poison, allowing you to get around Feigning Spell. Nidoking is slow, but if you can provide a Pokemon that enables a slower setup like Spiritomb, he has some pretty good potential. Coming in at number 5 is Mew Prime, another new card from Triumphant. Mew Prime is a very versatile card with his send-off attack and his Pokebody Lost Link. The attack, for 1 Psychic, allows you to search your deck for a Pokemon and send it to the Lost Zone. From here on out, through Mew's Pokebody Lost Link, you can use any attack from a Pokemon in the Lost World as long as you have the right energy attached to Mew. Big Pokemon that you could Lost Zone and attack for cheap are Machamp, Jumpluff, and Rhyperior level X. With good deck design, Mew Prime can score knockouts very quickly, but its biggest flaw is its own capacity for being knocked out. At 60 HP, Mew Prime will be one-shot almost every single turn, and keeping with the prize trade can be tough when you have to abandon one of your turns to use Send-Off. Another huge problem is Dialga GX, who shuts off your body and thus capacity to use any of your good attacks. Regardless, Mew Prime has great potential and should be seeing at least some play with some very creative decks. In at number 4 is Regigigas. While I didn't make videos at the time, I was a huge fan of Regigigas when he first came out in Stormfront. And while he has a few tough weaknesses, there's still a ton of support for Gigas with the new trainers. The strategy of Regigigas is this. You get energy in the discard pile, then use Gigas X's Sacrifice to knock out one of your own Pokemon, healing 80 damage, and attaching 2 basic energy from the discard pile to your Regigigas X. Sacrificing keeps your bench space open for a constant power lock with Mesprit from Legends Awakened. It might not be as good as when decks relied on Claydol too, but it still provides a lot of trouble preventing Uxie drops. Regigigas still has trouble with his ×2 weakness to fighting, being auto-knocked out with Machamp's Takeout and Gengar's colorless resistance. So, what helps him out now? Almost every big trainer card I mentioned works perfectly in Gigas. Because you use Sacrifice, you're purposely behind while still having an advantage. Both Twins and Black Belt should be available most of the entire game for you to use. Junk Arm also helps you discard your energy, as opposed to just using Regice's Regi move, and it also lets you replay trainers. Discarding is fundamental to get a fast Regigigas X out, and Junk Arm just makes everything easier. And finally, Seeker's another card that helps you maintain a Mesprit lock and redraw with Uxie. Some decks are crippled more than others by the power lock, and keeping it against some opponents can win you the game just by staying ahead in the speed game. It might have a couple bad matchups, but Regigigas definitely has potential. Number 3 is Magnezone. Magnezone saw a small spot last year as a deck similar to Cursecar with the Lightning One's Gyro Ball, but has struggled with dealing power and consistency. Enter Magnezone Prime. Magnezone Prime's magnetic draw isn't quite Claydol, but it's close. You draw until you have 6 cards in your hand, which is a great way to retain consistency. His Lost Burn attack is also a solution for hitting heavy, by dealing 50 damage times the amount of energy cards that you send to the Lost Zone from your Pokemon. Combine this with the fact that the Lightning Magnezone's ability is to recover energy from the discard, as well as Magnezone X's capability for moving energy from one Pokemon to another, and you have a really promising deck with a lot of options. Seeker once again works great in this deck. get a Magnezone to the bench by retreating using Warp Energy, and then use a Magnezone X to move the Metal and Lightning Energy off that Pokemon that you plan to pick up and heal. Then, move the energy to your new attacking Pokemon. This is one of the many cool combos that Magnezone allows, and it'll definitely be a great deck. Number 2 is Machamp. Everyone knows that straight Machamp decks can beat SP most of the time. Takeout is 1 energy auto knockout on many basic Pokemon, and there are a few ways to deal with this. So, if SP makes up for 3 of the top 4 decks, what keeps Machamp from being a top deck too? The answer is reasonable power. Machamp just can't fight against the bigger HP decks consistently. Machamp X was an option, but it almost guaranteed a quick return knockout. Machamp Prime is the answer to this problem. Machamp Prime has a ton of HP, so much that it makes most decks' usual option for KOing Machamp, Uxie X, short of a knockout within reasonable means. His power, Fighting Tag, lets you instantly swap out with the active and move any fighting energy you can from the old Pokemon over to the Prime. Champ Buster hits huge for 2 fighting and a double colorless, and with an expert belt, there's not much that you can't KO in one hit. Once again, Seeker plays a great combo here. You can continually switch between 2 Machamp Primes and use Seeker to heal off the ones that you left on the bench. Overall, Machamp Prime gives Machamp the capacity to beat other decks outside of SP, and it'll make a big city's threat. And number 1, as I'm sure you guys have guessed, is Gyarados from Stormfront. Gyarados struggled a little bit without Felicity's drawing, but it was still able to come in the 6th most wins in Master Cities. So, with an already impressive position, what pushes Gyarados to the next level? The answer is every card I've talked about in the intro. Black Belt and Twins help builds that sacrifice a Sableye in order to set up and come back into the game, but they aren't nearly as good as the other cards. Junk Arm works the same way it did in Regigigas. It helps you discard faster. This time you'll be discarding Magikarps instead of energy, but the idea remains the same. With Felicity's gone, Junk Arm serves as the perfect replacement, and also a great utility card for replaying your many trainers. Seeker is an amazing healer with Warp Energy, because you run on 0 energy to attack. Just Warp, Seeker to heal, play Gyarados back down, retreat, and attack. Rescue Energy is also an amazing recovery card for Gyarados. Because you attack with no energy, you don't have to worry about dropping it, and it instantly revives Gyarados as soon as you're knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, allowing you to play Gyarados right afterwards with broken time space. As an already established deck, giving Gyarados the most new support will give it huge potential for this future city's metagame. Now, I'm not saying that these decks will be able to topple the current top decks, Luxchamp, Dalgachamp, Sableye, and Valgarn, but at least they'll be able to compete with them, or provide you with a little bit of fun and variety. And who knows, if you keep practicing with a new deck, you might get really good with it. As always, thanks for watching Prof-It, and tune in next week. Have a great weekend. Peace.